Thank you so much, Mr. Kareem Ali. And first and foremost, we want to thank Pastor Scales for opening up his sanctuary for these families to come together and pray and seek not just comfort, but also justice that they so gratefully deserve. And I say that with great sentiment in my heart that these families, all they want is the answers to what happened to their children.
Amen.
They're not asking for anything extraordinary. They're not asking for anything special. They want the truth of what happened to claim the lives of their young sons. They want justice.
Amen.
They will tell you in their own special way why they believe justice is so important, not just for their families, but for your families as well.
Yeah.
Right? If it can happen to Chavis Carter, it can happen to your children. If it can happen to Kendrick Johnson, it can happen to your children.
Yeah.
I stand here to announce with you all when I had an opportunity to share with Ms. Carter and her family today. You see, Kendrick Johnson's family and Mr. Marcus Coleman and others traveled all the way from Georgia, Valdosta, Georgia, to be with Chavis Carter's family. And Victor White III family also traveled to be here. His attorney, Carol Lexenpower, my co-counsel from New Iberia, Louisiana, is en route as well, because they lost their children in very bizarre, to say the least, very bizarre ways that you wouldn't believe. Nobody would believe that their children really died like this unless we were here witnessing what the police were trying to tell us. If you saw this on TV, you'll say that's unrealistic. No way somebody can be handcuffed in the back of a police car and, like Houdini, as Kareem said, somehow finagle their way to, in Chavis's case, the allegation is he somehow handcuffed, figured out, managed how to have the gun come to his temple and shoot it in a downward trajectory to exit out of his ear, and then somehow put his hand back behind his back and have his head slumped over in the car. Victor White III, out of New Iberia, Louisiana, who Ms. Carter and her family had the opportunity to visit, was also in the back of the police car at the police station, handcuffed in the back of the car. And Victor White III, they allege somehow, even though they, like Chavis, supposed to have a pat down and check them, like Houdini maneuvered himself again and somehow managed to get a gun and shoot himself in the chest. Even though he's handcuffed in the back, to shoot himself in the chest, killing himself, and then get his hands back behind his back and to be slumped down in the car with his handcuffs still on his wrist. And then Jose Herta in Durham, North Carolina, another young man in the back of the police car at the Durham Police Department, somehow, again handcuffed, like Houdini, somehow maneuvers himself to get this gun after he's been patted down again. All three of them been patted down to make sure there were no weapons. And he somehow manages to, even though he's handcuffed, put his hands around and shoot himself in the face. And then put his hands back behind his back, handcuffs back on his wrist, and slump down in the police car. All of these tragedies defy logic. And Kendrick Johnson and his family from Valdosta, Georgia, he talks about bizarre deaths that defy logic. His mother and father sent him to school. with a book bag. The next day, he was returned to them in a body bag, with the explanation from the sheriff's department that he, for reasons unknown, climbed into a rolled-up wrestling mat in the high school gymnasium, trying to retrieve a tennis shoe from the bottom of the rolled-up wrestling mat, squeezed down in the wrestling mat somehow, got stuck, stopped breathing, and died. And so this bizarre death lends itself to the similarities of just strange, bizarre manners and cause of death that the law enforcement has told all these families it was your children's fault for their own deaths. And we're closing our investigations, and you all should just move on and get over it. Well, these families are refusing to just be silent.
That's right.
They're speaking up, they're standing up, and they're demanding justice for their children. Just as any parent would do it. And they're not just doing it just because they want justice for themselves. They're doing it because this is a community issue. This is a societal issue. Like in Ferguson, like in Staten Island, like in Sanford, Florida, like in Cleveland, Ohio, all over, we're saying that their children's lives matter. Their lives matter.
Man.
And that's why they're standing up here today, and they're traveling all over the country to support one another.
That's right.
That's why Teresa Carter and her family went to New Iberia, Louisiana. That's why Ms. Jacqueline Johnson and her family came to support Teresa Carter, because they have this unique, tragic fraternity that they are now a member of. And that is not only losing your child, but losing your child in an unbelievable manner.
Yeah.
And then having to fight for justice to get the truth as to what really happened to your child. Does anybody really believe Kendrick Johnson climbed into that wrestling mat, got stuck and died?
No.
Does anybody really believe Chavis Carter, handcuffed in the back seat of his car, in the police car, somehow managed to get a gun out and put it up to his temple and shoot it in a downward trajectory?
No.
Does anybody really believe Victor White somehow managed to put the bullet in his chest, even though he's handcuffed in his back?
No.
Does anybody really believe that Jose Herta, somehow handcuffed, managed to get the gun in front of his face, shoot himself in the face, and then put his hands behind his back? Or is it much more logical?
Come on.
Is it much more common sense to conclude that these individuals were victims of homicide?
Yes, sir.
That's right.
Somebody got to say it.
That's right.
It's the elephant in the room.
That's right.
If you're handcuffed behind your back, isn't it much more logical if you're shot in the temple of your head in a downward trajectory that somebody else did it?
Yes.
And as Kareem explained, isn't it such a coincidence that the video stopped working at that time? That the audio recording is suddenly lost? That the people who were in the car with Chavis are told to go away? And right at this time, at this moment, he's shot. Some people would say that's too much of a coincidence. So we got to get to the truth for Teresa Carter and for the Jonesboro community.
That's right.
Amen.
And what we have been told today by the Justice Department, because a lot of times in these tragic matters, whether it be in Valdosta, whether it be in Jonesboro, in New Iberia, just like in Ferguson and Staten Island, when people feel like they cannot trust the local law enforcement authorities, they turn to the federal government to say, we want equal justice too. And that our community demands equal justice as well. So the Justice Department, as you all know, opened up investigations into the matter of Chavis Carter along with Victor White III and Jesus Herta, because these are multi-state issues. One in North Carolina, one in Louisiana and one here in Arkansas. But what they have decided to do is not just look at the manner and cause of death and the uniqueness of those manners and cause of death, but they've also expanded their investigation to look into these police departments and the training that these officers are getting, because in every one of them, they said they did proper pat-down procedures of these individuals, but in each of these instances, they obviously, if you accept their version, and we do not, let me be clear on the record, we do not accept the version that these young men killed themselves.
That's right.
We think it is more akin to homicide
That's right.
than suicide.
That's right.
Let's be clear on the record. But they have opened up their investigation and expanded their investigation to review whether or not the police departments were negligent in their training of their officers on how to conduct pat-down searches of detained individuals. They've expanded their investigation to look to see if there's a pattern and a practice of racial profiling in these police departments. So, like in Ferguson, they said we don't just want to look at this isolated incident. We want to see if there are other incidents that would suggest a pattern and a practice that we need to correct, not just for Chavis Carter's sake, but for the whole sake of the Jonesboro community. And so this family is receiving this news cautiously optimistic that the Jonesboro Police Department will be properly investigated and reviewed, not just the officers that were on the scene with Chavis, but the whole department, from the chief down, to see if things were done appropriately and if the officers and the personnel were trained appropriately. With that being said, the journey for justice continues and the march to truth continues. And with that, I would like to call Ms. Teresa Carter, the mother of Chavis Carter, as well as Ms. Jacqueline Johnson, the mother of Kendrick Johnson, her supporters, Marcus Coleman, civil rights leader from Georgia, up to the podium, and Kareem Ali, if you would also join us again with Ms. Carter to address the media, and we will try to answer questions.